So we do have a quorum now. So good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock. We have the live stream up and running. So we will get started. Again, I do confirm we have a quorum with 4 members, with the exception of Councillor Neal and Councillor Boehm, who both have sent their regrets for this evening. I will open the meeting this evening as we do have to do the first item of business, which is the election of officers. But quickly before we do that, I will run through who is with us in the meeting. So from staff, we have Colin Wigington, Director, Arts and Culture Services, Danica Lockheed, Manager, Arts and Sector Development, Ian Sullivan is our host this evening, and as well as myself, Julia McCarty-Jansman, Committee Clerk. We also have Felix Lee from KAC joining us as well for the briefing. And we have no members of the public with us in the gallery currently. So we will now begin with the election of officers. So I will do nominations for chair and then do nominations for vice chair. So is there a mover for a nominee for the chair? Councillor Sanik?
I'll move Councillor Hutchinson.
So Councillor Hutchinson, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Perfect. Is there a seconder for this?
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Councillor McLaren. Are there any other nominations for chair? Seeing none, I will close the nominations for chair and call the vote. So all those in favor of Councillor Hutchison for chair? And that's carried. So Councillor Hutchison, would you like to do the nominations for vice chair, or would you like me to continue? Oh, just got me up. Okay, so I will.
You can do it. You can do it, and then I'll take it.
Okay, so we'll receive nominations for vice chair. So is there a mover for a nominee for the vice chair? Councillor Hutchison?
I would nominate Councillor Sanik, who I think does the job now. So she seems quite capable. Councillor
Sanik, do you accept the nomination?
Sure.
Perfect. Is there a seconder for this?
Okay.
Councillor Holland.
Councillor Holland. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? So seeing none, I will close the nominations for this and call the vote. So all those in favor of Councillor Osanik for vice chair? And that's carried. So Councillor Hutchison, I will now turn the meeting over to you to call it to order.
Thank you. Okay, now I'll call the meeting to order, the business meeting. Item number 3 is approval of the agenda. Do I have a mover for the agenda? Councillor Sanik, seconded by Councillor McLaren. I don't believe we have any addendums or amendments. Not seeing any. All those in favor of the agenda? It passes. Okay. Item 4, confirmation of the minutes of our last meeting, September 14th, 2021. Do I have a mover for the approval of the minutes? Councillor Sanik, Councillor Holland. Any additions, subtractions? None seen, so all those in favor? It passes. And item 5, disclosure of pecuniary interest. Not seeing any. 6 delegations, we have none. 7 briefings. We have Felix Lee, the grants coordinator for Kingston Arts Council, to speak to us on the approval of the CAC plan for administration of the arts. Felix.
Yes. Hello. Hello, I am here. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present the 2022 Plan for Administration of Arts Funding for the Corporation of the City of Kingston, which I will hereafter refer to as the Plan for Admin. As introduced, I am Felix Lee and I'm the Grants Coordinator for the Kingston Arts Council. The KAC has completed its annual review of the City of Kingston Arts Fund, CCAF. Every year, the KAC meets with CCAF jurors, artists, collective, arts organizations, and City of Kingston staff to review the plan for admin and discuss potential revisions to the next year's CCAF grants. Based on the feedback collected through this process and our own insights, KAC staff developed the draft plan for admin, which is then presented to and approved by our board of directors, the Arts Advisory Committee, Arts Recreation Community Policy Committee, and Kingston City Council. The draft 2022 plan for admin is being presented to you for your consideration and approval. I would like to provide some context for this year's review and for the proposed changes, as 2021 was an exceptional year for the CCAF program. In 2020, the city and the KAC recognized the unprecedented implications of COVID-19, and we implemented an expanded consultation, which included roundtables, a public survey, and additional committees. The outcomes of this process informed a number of significant changes to the 2021 plan for admin. These changes were implemented for operating and project grants in 2021, which were delivered successfully and on schedule, with 11 operating and 15 project grant recipients for a total awarded of $583,052. The city, in recognition of the impacts of the pandemic, also allocated $200,000 in one-time additional funding in 2021. This was intended to support artists and arts organizations, and a framework for this funding was separately approved by City Council on the 2nd of March. The KAC subsequently developed 2 new grants to distribute these funds: Resiliency, which has now awarded 100 grants of $1,000 each to individual professional artists to allow them to continue to work safely, and Adapt, which has now awarded 15 grants between $4,000 and $10,000 to individual artists, collectives, and nonprofit arts organizations to deliver arts projects responding to the challenges faced as a result of COVID-19. The KAC is extremely grateful for this one-time additional funding, which meant that the city's investment in 2021 was more than $700,000, which is the largest amount to date, and contributed greatly to the health and strength of the arts and culture community during a key recovery period. These 2 one-time funding programs, Resiliency and Adapt, are not described in the 2022 plan for admin, which we will review tonight. The 2022 plan for admin only describes operating and project grants. This fall, the KAC completed our consultation process to identify opportunities and challenges for CCAF in the next year. We considered the continuing impact of the pandemic, as well as new needs of the arts community. We sought feedback from KAC Board of Directors, the Grants Committee on the 21st of September, and the Arts Advisory Committee on the 23rd of September, as well as applicants, recipients, and city staff. As a result of this work done to date, the KAC has developed this draft plan, which was shared with you with changes noted. This draft has already been approved by the KAC Board of Directors on the 21st of October and the Arts Advisory Committee on the 10th of November with no further revisions. There are some changes that I would like to highlight for the 2022 CCAF grants from this document. The first is that additional eligibility text has been added. This appears in C1D for operating on page 7 and C2F, page 13 for project, to clarify that a recipient of a Resiliency or Adapt grant in 2021 is eligible to apply to operating and project grants in 2022. The purpose of the project grant program, which appears in C2A, page 9, has been revised to include more specific information around the intention of project grants, which is to demonstrate engagement with the Kingston community, to involve professional artists, and to pay artist fees. The language was drawn from existing adjudication criteria for this stream. The next change is that in 2022, individual professional artists are eligible to apply to the project program, in addition to the 2 existing eligibility categories of collectives and nonprofit organizations. This change appears in eligibility C2C, page 10, and there are additional clarifications throughout C2 project section. This change aligns the project grants program with the Adapt grants framework, which also allowed individual artists to propose arts projects. Individual artists must meet the definition of a professional artist that is provided. They must satisfy CCAF requirements, including proof of insurance and reports. They are also eligible to submit an application which is sponsored by a nonprofit organization through the existing procedure for unincorporated collectives. The next change is that a clarification has been made to exclusions from eligibility, C2F, page 12. This specifies that a project with the sole purpose of creating a new artistic work without a presentation and community engagement component is not eligible for a CCAF project grant. Applications are evaluated on artistic contribution, benefit to community, viability, and innovation. The last change that I would like to highlight is that the definition of a professional artist has been updated in the glossary of terms, Appendix C, page 34, which I referred to with the earlier change to eligibility. This definition has already been used in the CCAF program and is now being formalized for use in operating and project grants. Additional language clarifications may be noted as well throughout the document to better reflect current practices and improve the understanding of those practices for both jurors and applicants. And that concludes my presentation on the changes to the document. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak at this meeting.
Okay. So do we have any questions from the committee to the presenting? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation. Yes, these changes are I think quite welcome for a lot of artists, particularly the individual artists who we have heard from in the past. And so the question I have is regarding I think it's page it would be 21 of our report, 11 of yours, and it's the section on the requirements for individuals applying if they're doing a direct application. So it's C.2.D, and the letter of reference requirements, etc. But then there's also D, which says individuals without a sponsor may be required as part of their CCAF agreement to provide additional reports to provide sufficient accountability on the use of the funds. I'm just wondering, I guess, two questions. So in the consultations, was there feedback from artists on that or what that might look like? And also, if you could give a sense of what that would look like and whether the requirements would be considered very time consuming, because obviously the concern is that if it's an individual artist, we don't want to see them spending a lot of their time while getting grant funding, having to justify what they're doing.
Yes, so I can answer that. This actually, requirement D, the additional reporting for accountability and use of funds, is actually a requirement that's also in place for unincorporated collectives. So we chose to duplicate it for individuals, institute it for both. And the reasoning behind that requirement is that an incorporated nonprofit or registered charity has year-end financial statements or equivalent that go through an auditing process, but a collective or an individual artist would not have those. And so essentially that is the function of that reporting, that we may ask for additional information on their handling of the funds because we know cannot provide us with an audited statement the way a nonprofit organization can. So that is to say that additional information would not be built into the process. There's no additional request that's automatically part of the application for collectives or individuals. It would be requested, or it could be added as an additional requirement by a jury. Juries can allow provisions on the grant as well, that they want additional information. Or it could be something that we request upon submission of a final report, that we would ask them for additional information on the management of funds. Does that completely answer the question?
It does, for sure. There's lots of clarity now about the financial part, and that's what I was expecting. But then in terms of the actual sort of benefits from, the justification or whatever, the engagement with the community and all those other things that are often criteria, it wouldn't be something like that in the midst of the grant, correct? Like it would be, would it be something, so say a year-end financial statement type thing, but not an ongoing process of having to say this much outreach, this much this many people paid attention to my work, but that might come at the end in a final report.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. The reporting function currently is that we ask them to provide estimated set of statistics and qualitative measurements, quantitative measurements essentially in the application, and then we duplicate that in the final report. So we would be looking for an estimated and an actual to be listed in the final report, and that's the main way that we do that check. There is also an interim report, which is much more general. It's only about 2 pages long, that allows them to provide meaningful updates if they've had a significant change to their finances or staffing, et cetera. That could happen with a long-term project. But no, it would be an additional requirement that could be requested if we feel that they have not provided essentially sufficient evidence of how they're going to manage the funds through the reporting process that's already in place.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, Councillor McLaren?
Thank you. I heard that last year there was a little bit of a debate as to whether artists included comedians. And I understand that the former definition was tweaked or perhaps bent a little bit to incorporate them. And at least 2 comedians have received funding through this. Is that correct so far?
I see Danica has a hand raised, so I expect she has a contribution to that question, so I'll let her go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, thanks for the question, Councillor McLaren. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm hearing a bit of feedback. So in response to your question, yes, I think what we're referencing, the issue and the sort of what came about in terms of comedians being able to access specific funding opportunities was actually through the local arts residency program that we, the Arts and Culture Services Department, launched at the Grand Theatre. This came to us as a question if comedians were considered part of a professional performing artist definition, which we clarified that they were. So that specific discussion was had, and we clarified that comedians are absolutely eligible to apply to the residency program. That then transfers to the Resiliency grant program, which I think is again what is being referred to, especially if they're individual professional artists, comedians, who are looking for specific funding, and they would have been considered eligible for the Resiliency grant program that was administered last year.
Great. And does this new definition allow for easier access or harder access for comedians?
I would say that in terms of the CCAF definition that we've included in the document, it does not specify discipline. So there's no restriction on artistic discipline for application to CCAF. And we do consider that if a comedian were doing a performance piece, that would be in the same category as other performance works, such as theater. So the definition as it exists now is that a professional artist has developed skills through training or practice and is recognized by artists working in the same artistic tradition, has a history of public presentation or publication, seeks payment for their work, and actively practices their art. So it was essentially formulated from best practices in our understanding of other funding agencies in terms of defining what makes a professional artist. But there was no concern from the KAC's perspective about defining genre or discipline in terms of the type of work.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions of the presenter? I've got a couple. At least one. The first one is regarding the resiliency grants, which are ceasing, but I just wondered if the $1,000 made was enough to make a significant difference for a number of those 100 recipients.
Yes, I can touch on that. So we did hear through our reporting process, most resiliency recipients have submitted an impact statement to us at this time. So the majority of those 100 that received grants have returned to us information on how they use them and what the impact was. And overwhelmingly, they reported that it had a really significant impact on them. They cited quite a few issues in terms of financial stress throughout 2020 and 2021, loss of job opportunities, loss of work because of lockdowns. And they did feel that the resiliency grant positively impacted their career. The most common use of funds was to cover artist fees for projects that had stalled without financial revenue. Investing in improving equipment was also a large use. So transitioning to digital work was a big upfront cost that a lot of artists had to tackle during 2020 and 2021. And almost all of them noted that this did improve both their career on a logistical level and also mentally, emotionally provided a level of support from their perspective from the city that they appreciated. So that is to say that also the demand for resiliency grants was quite high. So the total funding request was almost $400,000. So it was far in excess of the $100,000 available. So my answer would be that it was well appreciated. Artists really did use those amounts and it had an impact. But we know that the demand and the request did obviously exceed what was available.
Interesting. I believe Ms. Lockett has her hand up. There's a hand anyway.
No, sorry, Councillor Hutchison, I do not have my hand up.
Oh, you don't? Oh, there's a little hand on your picture for some reason. Okay. We'll just live with that. Okay, my second question was, there's mention of surveys that have been done internationally and nationally. See, are there groups or individual artistic groups or individual artists, not so much individual artists, but artists as individuals that are at risk in Kingston, particularly at this time?
If I can ask for clarification on what risk we were assessing.
It's in the report, and it doesn't, I think it means having to cease, I'm guessing, okay, because it's not in the report that I saw. That the artist was at risk of having to give up the art or give up making their living from artistic performance of various sorts. I see Ms. Lockhead has her real hand up now. Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Hutchison. I think you might, if I'm sort of understanding, you're referring to a section in the report that we drafted around the impact of the City of Kingston Arts Fund and some data that we shared around a survey that the Canada Council for the Arts, so Canada's national arts funder, had done early on in the pandemic in May 2020. And a couple of the points that we talked about and that we included in this report, which I think you're speaking to and referencing, is that, you know, within the arts sector, no field of the arts of practice would be untouched by this crisis. And that certain aspects of the sector remain at risk, you know, given the nature of the arts sector and how it functions. You know, we're now seeing a slight return to what once was, but the process is quite gradual, and there is still a lot of uncertainty and instability within the art sector overall. And that on top of that, most recipients recognize that financial aid to help weather this crisis, where work would not be available within the art sector, was essential. And so that Canada Council for the Arts survey mirrored what the Kingston Arts Council identified as well through their outreach and roundtables with the arts community over the course of the summer of 2020. And all of the conversations that were being had within the arts sector here was that this was obviously unprecedented and that there was not necessarily relief in sight. And so additional measures to support artists, but also arts organizations remain stable during this time was essential.
That's right. Okay, and thank you for embroidering on the report. I appreciate that. My question then, in that context, is I think the answer is partly that all sectors are under some threat or risk at the moment. Are there particular artistic individual, I don't know how to quite put it, artistic groups or individual types of artists that are under particular risk in Kingston that we should know about in case it comes up in like 6 months or something? Since I don't see the COVID going away anytime, in the next 2 weeks or 2 months.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchison. I can respond. I see Colin also has his hand up. I mean, I think what I'll offer at this point is specifically what we've seen through the Arts and Culture Services Department, the performing arts sector. So musicians, actors, anyone working within the performing arts. That sector has been one of the slowest to recover due to the live audience nature of that art form. Certainly within the visual arts, we were able to see galleries reopen with limited number of people coming through at a quicker rate, but they are still in the middle of that challenge as well.
Good. And Mr. Wigginton?
Thank you. And in response to your question, Mr. Chair, I think what we also have to recognize is that even prior to the pandemic, the ability of someone to make an earning or a livelihood through the arts was challenging at the best of times. I don't have statistics in front of me, but anecdotally, I would say that most artists who try to pursue some sort of career would often find themselves at or below the poverty level generally, unless they're able to supplement their income through other means. And that's, again, one of the things that's negatively impacted artists and creatives as a result of COVID is the loss of income through a heavy reliance on gig economy type jobs in the service industry. So there's that kind of dynamic as well that's at play. So, I mean, this is one of the things that Danica and I are starting to unpack even more with the work we're beginning on the creative industry strategy, because we are able to get more in-depth information about people's ability to earn a living related to their pursuits, and some of the more commercialized art forms like film or recording in some ways have greater viability because of the distribution models associated with how their work gets out there, even more so than, say, a visual artist. So, I would hazard guess there's many artists in Kingston who are not actually able to make a living through their work unless they are somehow affiliated to an organization like Queen's University or St. Lawrence College. And so this is part of the dynamic of people pursuing this work, because it's as much a passion as it is a vocation, and finding ways to make a viable living can be challenging at the best of times.
Okay. Not the happiest response. But one I probably should have anticipated. Anyway, I still think it's good, and as I'm sure everybody cares quite a lot on this particular committee. So, partly because we hear about it a lot more. So I think it's good to know. Are there any other questions from the committee, from the presenter? Seeing small negative signs. So I will say thank you very much, and to Felix Lee, and we'll move on to the next item, which is the business and the approval of the Kingston Arts council plan for administration of the arts, funding for the corporation of the city of Kingston in 2022. And there's some that there's Colin right there. He didn't go away. So did you want to speak to this, Mr. Wigginton?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to make a couple of comments. I appreciate the discussion about the resiliency and the ADAPT grants. And as Felix Lee pointed out, it was fantastic that council had the commitment to provide that one-time funding in 2021 as an ancillary program connected to the City of Kingston Arts Fund. And has already been referenced, the uptake was remarkable. It also helped us get a sense of the number of professional artists in Kingston, and has been referenced, the demand exceeded the funding that was available. But that experience helped us really to work closely with the Kingston Arts Council and all the various groups who are invested in this program to move forward with some further additions, such as the ability for individual artists to now participate in the project grant funding. So that's a great evolution and something that we continue to hope to unpack as we pursue the bigger fund review in 2022. And I also want to comment upon the fact that we're very grateful to have this partnership with the Kingston Arts Council through a service level agreement. And in particular, I want to give some recognition to Felix Lee himself as the person who really did much of the heavy lifting through 2021 to make all of the 4 grant programs that were available successful, and to administer them so professionally and so well. And also was the person leading the review process that's resulted in the administration plan that you see before you tonight. It's an incredible amount of work, and it's done so well and with such thorough thoughtfulness and professionalism. I feel very fortunate we have this partnership with the Kingston Arts Council to do this work.
Well, that's very good. Does Felix Lee have their hand up? Again, I'm getting a little white hand, not the usual hand that you get when you ask questions. And the answer is no. Okay, thank you. It's just impossible to tell what hand matters. Okay. Anyways, perhaps Councillor Holland has experienced it too as a chair. I don't know. Anyway, do we have any questions of staff on this item? No one has any questions. Good. I have one comment. That is, I really appreciate the amount of work that staff clearly has put into that, including Felix Lee. And I think Felix's and Danica's remarks and your own, Colin, has really made it quite clear why that money to the arts was so important. And even though it didn't seem like, well, in total, it seemed like a fair bit, but individually it didn't seem like so much. But I guess if you're desperate, it did something for people. So, it's good to have that. I can't believe the amount of work that goes into revising this plan it seems like every year. And but then I think about the people that, artists are people of opinions. That's my opinion, my experience. So perhaps that has something to do with it. So that's wonderful. If there are any questions from just checking again from the committee, Councillor Holland.
More of a comment, really. Again, yeah, just thanks. I think over the years, I've been on and off this committee, so I've had this opportunity to go through the process a few times. And over the years, mostly the comments have been around the individual artists. I mean, I think most people in the community and artists would love to see a lot more money going into all of this. And I certainly would love to see way more money going into all of this. And I do hope after the pandemic that as things get better, that people will support the arts in the way that they have, with all the enthusiasm that they have our other local businesses. But I guess in the meantime and going forward, it would be nice to to expand our support. At the very least, we offer it wholeheartedly, and on behalf of residents who really benefit from the incredible art scene in Kingston. And I guess, yeah, just to, again, pick up on the fact that so many artists are, as Mr. Wigginton mentioned, pursuing that at various stages while doing other things, or while, different stages in their career or in their life. And so to have these individual opportunities available now seems to be an incubator in a way, which only will do wonderful things for what we already have with these amazing artists doing the work here. So I'm really happy to see that. And thanks for all the work that's gone into the consultation and putting this together.
Thank you. Councillor Sonic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I just want to thank Felix so much for presenting the report so clearly and thoroughly. That was like a great overview of the report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I noticed that too. Like, how can you ask questions when they've all been anticipated? I did have a question. I want to bring up something I talked to Mr. Wigginton about before, but dealing with individual artists, it seems to me that that was something we wouldn't have touched 15 years ago. And so there seems to be a sign of maturation of the department and the program overall, the whole Kingston Arts Council system, and so that's good to see. And I don't know if you have any comment on that or not, Mr. Wigginton.
Thank you. And in response to your question, Mr. Chair, I mean, I will add that, as you've said, this has been an evolutionary process from where the program started in 2007 to where we are now in 2021. We're always very aware that there is a desire to support individual artists. When the program first was established, the feeling was that artists benefited through their relationships to the fund recipients, whether they were operating grant recipients or project grant recipients. It's always been a foundational premise or assumption of the City of Kingston Arts Fund that professional artist fees are paid and that professional artists are engaged in that work. And so it was sort of a more indirect experience. In Canada, we're very fortunate that we have a robust tradition of arts funding at all levels of government. So there has always been well-established individual artist grants programs through organizations like the Ontario Arts Council and the Canada Council. So our emphasis had been on sort of the larger endeavors of organizations and groups and collectives. But I think the pandemic has really highlighted the need for individual artists. And I do anticipate that we'll see a continuing evolution of that movement through the larger fund review that we'll be doing so that we can ensure a level of recognition here in Kingston as well.
Right. Just one other aspect of this is that it seems that the department is confident that it can not only administer but ensure that the public funding is being used in the way it's intended. I think that the systems have been worked out and processes and procedures have been worked out so that we can, I think that's another reason why you're not getting so many questions is because we've learned to have a really strong confidence in the department. So, but it does seem that we can be confident that, the funding is being spent I wouldn't say properly, but appropriately with regard to the program itself. Do you have anything to say about that?
Sure. And in response to your question, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to sort of speak to the fact that, the City of Kingston Arts Fund is actually often commented upon by our colleagues in other municipalities and other funding agencies as being a model of a municipal arts funding program. We're very fortunate that we've been able to develop that. It really is down to the leadership of the Kingston Arts Council, who we have contracted for so many years to have this relationship with, and their capacity to do this professionally is very much appreciated, as I mentioned before. And also, as it's evolved, what's also built into the City of Kingston Arts Fund, which may not be as visible, is we are part of a consortium or network of funding organizations through an organization called CADAC, Canadian Arts something. I should know that off by heart, but it's a national body of funding groups that work together. And this is particularly in relation to the operating grant program. We pay a fee to be part of that process, and all the applications from operating grant applicants come in through the CADAC platform, supported by financial information as well as activity-related information. And through that relationship, those submissions are audited year over year through the agency that is the Canada Council. So, not only are we working locally at a level to make sure that the program is being managed responsibly, we also have those kinds of checks and balances with the operating grant. And the other strength of this program is the fact that recommendations are made at arm's length by a jury that's assembled every year by the Kingston Arts Council for both the operating and project grants. And so it is members of the community themselves who are making the assessment and making then the recommendations that council ultimately ratifies. And so, it is the community acknowledging and supporting the community through this mechanism that's been set up. And, the Arts Council then has a very robust, but not too onerous, reporting process to make sure that what has been proposed in any grant is actually being realized and achieved as intended. So I feel very confident on behalf of the city that this is a program that has been so worth supporting on the part of council, and has just gone from strength to strength over the years, and that we will come back with an even better program as we move out of this current phase of a global pandemic.
Thank you very much for that. It's good to be reminded and have it sketched out for us, the whole structure that's behind this, that has been built up really in the last decade or so, and see that it's a very resilient situation. So, and yes, we need to recognize that we've had some outstanding people on the Kingston Arts Council, so who had a vision of what they wanted to achieve. So, okay, so any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, there is a motion, and I will read the motion, and then we will debate it if necessary. So it says, the recommendation is that Arts, Recreation, and Community Policies Committee recommend to council that the following: that the plan for administration of arts funding for the corporation of the City of the Kingston Arts Fund in 2022, attached to report number ARC 22001 as Exhibit A, be approved as presented. Do we have a mover? Councillor McLaren, second by Councillor Holland. Does anyone wish to comment or ask questions at this juncture? Not seeing any. I will call the question. I will not call the question. I will call the vote. All those in favor of the recommendation, it passes unanimously, and I think everybody's happy about that. And so moving on to the next item, which is 8B, report received from the Arts Advisory Committee. And so the Arts Advisory Committee is reporting to us, as they are supposed to do, and they recommend the following, which is 8B, item 1 or I. And I'll just read this right now, that the Arts Recreation Community Policy Committee recommend to council that John Geronimus and Victor, and I'm not sure this is French or Italian, somebody might help me out here. The Orcia be appointed to the Art and Public Places Working Group. So, does anybody have any on the committee have any comment? Not seeing anything. I will call the vote. And all those in favor?
Mr. Chair, I just need to get a mover and a seconder for that as well.
Oh, second, excuse me. Yeah, mover and a seconder. So who moved? Councillor Sanic and Councillor Holland. Okay. Sorry about that, Julia. I'll get hit with a ruler later. So all those in favor of the motion, of the recommendation. Okay, that passes unanimously. That might help me. So that's the end of the business. With item number 9, motions. We don't have any. 10 notices of motion. We don't have any. I don't believe. Don't see any hands, I don't think. 11, other business. We don't have any. 12, correspondence. 13, the date of the next meeting is to be determined. That'll be called by staff or by myself as chair. And then we will proceed from there. So I'm asking now for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Sandy, second by Councillor McLaren. And Councillor Holland is eager. So, yeah. So that's very good. All those in favor? That's very good. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to staff. That was a really good presentation. Thanks to Julia, who puts up with us every couple of months. So everyone have a good rest of the evening. Thanks very much. Bye now.